Okay. So we have Fallout co-creator Tim Kaine says today's games suffer from trying to be everything for everyone. When you should be learning from old focused games. These games were really focused because they had to be. Yes, I think this is so true. And he made a video, and I think we should watch the video. I want to watch the video. I want to hear what he has to say. And let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about lessons from old games.
Ooh.
I've never talked about this. Comes from a good question from Ewan Hasty 6779, and I hope I pronounced your name right, who asked,
I feel that
Hi,
way all
Tim,
the
a
time.
question that hopefully hasn't been asked already. What do you think can be learned from old games? Is there any lost wisdom out there? Yes, there is. Good question.
That's a good question.
Particularly good question because it's clear and short and to the point.
Yep.
So I really like that question. I'm not going to say I thought I had talked about this, but I do have a lot of other lessons from videos. I'll link them all below. It ranges from lessons from school, lessons from my company, lessons from failures. So I think it's a particularly good one because I've learned the most from my games that didn't work out.
And that's a problem with a lot of studios like we just see with Ubisoft is like when they fail, and I think the industry as a whole, and you see this in Hollywood as well, they make an enemy out of the audience instead of taking accountability for their failures.
But this is a good question about what can we learn from older games that were released.
Yep.
And in particular, I'm going to narrow this down and talk about lessons that you can learn from 80s games. That's games from the 1980s. Because A, I was there,
Yeah.
I was present.
He's an authority figure for
My
that.
teen years, but
This
I had
is like
a
an
game
interview.
industry job. I was making games for set-top console boxes. I was making PC games, so I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and
he's
I
a credible
can speak
source.
from experience, not from I heard. But this is what happened.
That's
this
me.
Is what we
I'm
did.
the guy that's heard things.
And let me just sum up for you what the 80s were like. Our hardware was not powerful. It was.
And that's the thing now, right? Gaming has become so much more accessible to developers, which is a fantastic thing because now you can have a group of 30 people make Expedition 33 and compete against a group full of hundreds, if not thousands, of employees or other developers. That is the importance of hardware or technology increasing, is that it's not just stuck in the hands of a corporate system. It's easier now more than ever for anyone to go in and make a video game.
I mean, my smartphone is more powerful than any computer I worked on in the 80s.
Yep.
In terms of speed, in terms of memory, just in every possible way. There were no hardware standards, and you guys really have to understand what this means.
Ooh,
Games
I
are
didn't
being
think
made
about
for
that.
PC, for Apple, for Atari, for Commodore, for all a wild assortment of consoles. You know, Atari, Nintendo, Intellivision, Odyssey. There was nothing standardized across any of those.
Ooh.
In fact, if you made any game for a stand-up arcade game, it's often on unique hardware made just for that machine. There were no software standards.
So you had to choose
sometimes
your market.
We worked in C. Sometimes we worked in BASIC. Sometimes we worked directly in assembly because that's the only way you could get the speed.
Wow.
There were no design standards. There were
You know what this is all leading up towards? Because he's talking about this because this is important. If you wanted to make a game, you had to really want to make a game. It wasn't enough that, I want to make a game and I want to push my ideals into the game and I want to make a game. I want to make this cute game that talks about what I want to do. No, you had to struggle. So you had to make sure that what you were about to make was literally your hopes and dreams.
There were no pillars. There were no documents about pacing and economy. None of this stuff. In fact, there wasn't even specialization in the industry.
Sorry,
You basically
allergies.
had programmers and sometimes
take my
artists.
nasal spray
Sometimes
today.
the programmers did the art. And that's it. You didn't have narrative designers. You didn't have rigging specialists. You certainly didn't have anybody.
Not that people don't put their hopes and dreams in video games today. There are so many game developers that are struggling today, and I don't want to discredit them at all. But we have way more resources than they did back then. That's just the fact.
who specialized so so narrowly that they didn't do most of the other tasks that were on the game. So
Yeah, that
these
that
games
right
are
there.
really
There's people nowadays, you could just be an artist and just make art for your video game. Whereas like back then, he said the programmers had to do art as well. Like you kind of like how I feel right now as a creator. Like I wanted to review games, and all I wanted to do was review video games and movies, but I couldn't just do that. And unless I didn't love what I was doing, I had to learn how to edit. I had to teach myself how to edit. I had to teach myself how to write. I had to teach myself what good narrative means. I had to become a writer in order to critique writing. Like, I have a bunch of resources that I think people back in the early days of YouTube didn't have, and they definitely had to work harder than I did. But if you truly want something, you really have to push yourself to go get that thing.
focused because
I don't want to be an editor, right? I don't, but it's something that I had to learn.
It had to be. And what I want to talk about today, the lessons you can learn from that is you can learn a lot from games that were required to be focused, because I think that's kind of an overriding possible issue with today's games is they don't really know what they want to be. They try to be
No, they know what they want to be. They want to be money-making machines. They want to be printers that print out dollar bills, okay? They know what they want to be.
everything to everyone, designed by committee, making a publisher happy,
Ooh, designed by
trying to guess
committee.
what the largest
Publisher
demographic
happy.
wants.
Ooh, yeah.
So let's talk about 80s games and what we can
Oh
learn.
my
And I'm gonna
gosh,
start
he's so
with something I've already
right.
mentioned.
He's so right. Dude, designed by committee. Make what the publisher wants. Do you see the difference there? You are no longer making something you want to make. Now it's a team effort. Huge emphasis on the team word.
Which was hyper efficient code. You didn't have a lot of memory.
Now he's talking about the
Didn't have
80s.
fast processors. You needed to be efficient. It's not that you wanted to be efficient, or wouldn't it be cool if we were efficient? It was you write efficient code or your game doesn't work.
Yep. And this is why the industry feels overbloated. There's no need for efficiency. You think of Expedition 33, you think of how that game's made, how there's linear level design, because they need to be efficient. They don't have time to make empty spaces. There's no time to make an open world with a bunch of empty spaces, because I just need to make the space that matters to the gamer, to the player, and move on, because I don't have time to do anything else, right? And that's how I feel too. It's like, yeah, I could sit here and make a digital review, but am I being efficient with my time if I do that? Or can I just make a gaming 101 as well and still get the same amount of viewers? I keep doing this, thinking about my own channel because I relate to this, but anyways, keep going.
On the Atari console, just doing graphics required timing.
Yeah.
You didn't say I want a pixel drawn here. You measured how many milliseconds it was, and then you said turn on, and it would turn on and turn off, and then you had a pixel at that spot in the screen. That was
Jeez.
remarkably tightly controlled. You have no idea. And it wasn't like you could go look it up anywhere.
Sounds annoying.
There were no documents for any of
Oh.
these things. You just had to figure it out.
That's why I
or
use
learn from
Adobe
someone who
Premiere,
knew,
because when
or
I used a
wade
free
your
editing
way through
model,
really
sorry, I know, I'm going to try to stop less. That's why I use Adobe Premiere, because when I used a free editing model and I needed to learn, I couldn't find any resources to help me learn except from Adobe Premiere, but they didn't go one-to-one. And when you know absolutely nothing, you're just like, you spend 4 hours to learn something that should have only taken you 30 minutes. So then I just bit the bullet, invested in Adobe Premiere. This isn't an advertisement for Adobe Premiere. It frustrates me more than anything else. But now whenever I need to learn something, I have the resources available to me. So that's the difference here and there. He didn't have those resources. He didn't have Google. He didn't have a bunch of YouTubers that specialize in just Adobe Premiere. And so if you really, really had to dig into the trenches to make what you wanted to make.
these technical hardware specs to try to figure out what to do, what memory locations needed to have.
And what does that mean? That means that you have to make a good game. You have no choice but to make a good game, because all this work better been for something.
values written to them to change the hardware into a different video mode, or to get the location of a mouse cursor or if a key was pressed. Super efficient. Second thing I want to talk about is tight game loops. I have a video on core game loop, so I don't want to repeat all that here, but I define the core game loop as what most players spend most of their time doing.
Yep.
That's the core game loop.
Yep.
In 80s games, that game loop was tight. It was, here's the game, play, doing it, you're doing it now, you're immediately dropped in, you're doing it, have fun. And these game
Ghost of Yotai. Ghost of Yotai, I've talked about this. The game loop in the open world doesn't exist. Why are we chopping bamboo? Why are we using the Sony's DualShock controls to light campfires? Why is half the content in the game skippable? Why you shouldn't be happy to skip gameplay. Right? That is what he's talking about. Like, why are we wasting time making content and not providing a valuable structure for the players?
loops were small and tight because they had to be.
Yep.
We couldn't make giant sprawling games with tons of different things. Like, I think I'll go craft now. I think I'll go explore now. I go think I'll do this puzzle now. I go think I'll do combat now. I go think I'll talk to all these NPCs now. You couldn't do all that. You had to pick what section, what segment of all that.
And as great as crafting and talking to NPCs and all those things are, it is important to have a priority. It is important to focus. You look at games like Mass Effect, right? Before, Mass Effect could do all these things, but they kept it tight. And I think that's what made Mass Effect so great. Same with Dragon Age. Dragon Age kept it tight. And then you look as Dragon Age started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you have Dragon Age Veilguard, which doesn't focus on the main gameplay loop anymore. It focuses on so many other things that mostly the dialogue or mostly with the characters and what they're going through, but it has nothing to do with the gameplay loop.
Gameplay do I want to represent?
Yep.
And then you did that.
Yep.
There was no, the idea that you could have a core game loop that was a huge variety of actions just pretty much did not exist.
I need to watch more of his
Which brings
videos.
me to the next thing about 80s games. Is
a
you
lot
were
of time
always
learning
playing.
how to
You
write.
can think of that as the A/B.
And I want to spend a lot of time learning how
Always be
to
playing.
make video games.
You didn't spend your time in front of this console or this arcade stand-up or your computer watching the game show you things. If it did, it was super brief. It was like a villain would pop, ha ha ha, I have the ring now. Ha,
There
ha, ha.
you
And you're,
go.
like, right in there, and you're shooting, all of his minions and stuff, and I'm gonna get you, villain. You were always playing. There were no 5-minute cutscenes. There were no in-game camera changing.
You
There was
have
no long
so
conversation.
many game developers wanting to be Kojima. You have so many game developers wanting... Kojima's the exception. He's not the rule. You have so many people wanting to make a movie out of their video game, to force a message through their video game, when in reality, that's not what... those are two different mediums. And you need to write and create and make your product into something that fits its medium. You need to adapt it to its medium. You shouldn't turn a video game into a movie. You should turn a movie into a video game.
Because there couldn't be. That was unsupported. So you were always playing those games. You would always be playing.
Yep.
Brings me to the next thing, which was 80s games had very, very focused stories. You could describe the story probably in a sentence or two, because of course they had to be short. Usually the goals were really simple. Find this ancient artifact, rescue someone, kill a villain.
Okay.
Maybe 2 of those.
I see where he's going
Rarely
with that.
3 of those. Not much more than that. And if the game was wrapped around a villain, it was usually, okay, I'm going to go get this villain. So first I'm going to kill a lot of henchmen or a lot of, trash mobs. And then they get harder and I may encounter his lieutenant. And then finally I'm up against the villain, and it's what the whole game has built towards.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. You might even...
Very simplistic. Very simplistic. Now, I don't know if he's talking from a writer's point of view, but there is something to take from this, from a narrative, from a writer's point of view, is that less is more. You want a premise. You want, before you start writing anything, you want a very, very strong premise, a one-line sentence that describes your entire story, right? That is, if you can do that, then anytime you start to write, does it connect to your premise? Is it connecting to your premise? If not, you cut it. You chop it off, you get rid of it, you sacrifice it, and you stay on the premise, right? That is why my 101 videos are like 30 minutes long and my digital reviews are 5 minutes long. It's because I make a premise for my video and I just stick to that premise. And I'm able to talk about everything I talk about in my 101 videos, but because I've worked so hard to stay on point, I don't need to waste your time listening to my rambling like you are now.
Play a game where it doesn't even have that. It doesn't even have a story. It's just go into this dungeon and collect treasure.
Yeah.
That's the entirety of Gauntlet.
Well, and that's the
you just
oh, God, I loved Gauntlet. God, I miss Gauntlet. Well, and that's the thing is with what he's saying here is like that is the same structure as a premise. That is the same structure as a simple gameplay loop. You don't need to, and this is great because when I think about game design, I think about me as a dungeon master, and you should totally watch Project Odyssey. Season 2 comes out in February. I think about, what is the core of what we're trying to accomplish here? And that is what's important. That's why not all video games need stories. That's when you think of like Megabonk, your goal is just to survive, right? And everything around Megabonk revolves around your survival. Every gameplay mechanic, every chest you open, every statue you talk to, every NPC you interact with revolves around your survival. Because it's a simple gameplay loop that continues to go back to its premise. And that's where I'm going to use Ghost of Yotai again, where it's like, is everything you do in Ghost of Yotai going back to its premise? I'm keeping this for the future. Oh my gosh. I am keeping this for the future. This is great. This is great. What he's saying, everything here is great.
You're playing
So I'm
to
going to
get
critique
stuff,
games.
and that's it.
Yep.
But sometimes you're just playing to live. That's the entirety of Berserk and Antic.
Yep.
The sequel to Berserk. You're just playing to live. How far can you live? Like Pac-Man. How long can you go
Megabonk.
in a quarter? That's
How
the
long can you
entirety
go
of
in
the
a
story.
quarter? Yep.
Which brings me to the related thing, which is settings. All these games have very simple settings that can be described like
Less
remember
is
when movie
always more.
trailers used to always start in a world. You could do that for 80s games and you would say one sentence and that would be the entire setting.
You should only ever be able to describe everything you want in one setting, one sentence. It is. I know he's talking from a game developer's point of view, but this is how a lot of things work. If you can say it in one sentence, you're done. You know you're on the right track. If you need to explain yourself, that's longer than the amount of characters that Twitter allows. You're failing. You don't know what you're talking about.
Aliens have invaded. Necromancer is running amok and killing people and then bringing them back as zombies. Or the robots have rebelled. You need to stop it. And that's it.
That's it.
That's the story. Now, there could be some complexity for the player to look for. There might be books for them to read, pop-ups that they can, they click on something and a pop-up happens.
Sure.
But you didn't have to do it, and there weren't nearly as many of those as there are in today's games because you just didn't have the memory to store all that. And
Right.
yeah, I'm talking text. We didn't have the memory to
What does that mean? That means all the forced narratives that you hear, all the idealistic conversations that happen in video games today, all those moments where Jin, and I say Jin, where Jubei and Atsu are arguing about pointless politics would have been cut from 80s games because they wouldn't have the ability to do so. And it would have been cut because it's not important and it doesn't stick to the premise of what they're talking about. That is so important because what it means is he said, let the players find the complexity. Not let me force this down your throat. Not the developers. Hey, I have this idea for you. I want you to enjoy it. That's what it means to force narrative onto someone. It's not necessary for the story, and yet the developers are telling you it's necessary.
Store all that text. We didn't have much.
This is the same guy from the Samus video game. People don't like the nerdy dude from the Samus video game because everything he says is not necessary for the story. It's stuff that would have been cut out from an 80s video game.
Memory. I always like to point to the Lord of the Rings at this point because I love Lord of the Rings. You can view this the setting of the Lord of the Rings as, you know, here's an older here's a fantasy world. And then the storyline is basically the bad guy lost an artifact. If he gets it, this whole world is destroyed. So let's go destroy it ourselves.
Yep.
That's it. That's the entire thing.
I've never seen this video. I swear. What did I just tell you guys? A premise. All writers know this. This is the basic to writing. Good writers, I should say. The premise of something should be said in one line. And what does he reference? A book. He starts referencing writing to explain his thought better, to give a metaphoric analogy to what he's talking about. I'm telling you guys, the less is more.
A lot of complexity that you can dive down into if you want, but you don't need it. And since earlier games couldn't provide it, they just gave you that bare bones setting. Hey, you live in a fantasy world. Hey, there's a bad guy. Go destroy his ring.
And that's all you need.
Okay, so what does all this mean? What lessons can you learn from all this?
I've kind of been inputting my own lessons in between every line.
Old games couldn't do very much.
Nope.
So they avoided a problem of modern games that I see as becoming indulgent. They add too many things, thinking those more of those things make the game better.
Yeah.
And really what they do is they dilute the game. I frequently, because I'm always talking about food. I'm thinking about food.
He talked about food. I talked about Ghost of Yotai and the extra content that was in Ghost of Yotai. I don't know if he's playing any current games or if he's just trying not to step on the toes of other people, but I'll do it. I'll step on all the toes and hurt all the toes of all those. I'll critique them all. No, this is exactly what he's talking about, is you have games that add in mechanics that are not necessary. They add in storylines that are not necessary. The Ghost of Yotai, if you have things that are skippable, why even put it in the game in the first place? If you have gameplay moments that are skippable, don't even put them in your game. They're not, you're telling the player they're not worth doing, so don't put it in your game. Same goes with characters and writing characters. Everyone is annoyed with the Samus character, that nerdy dude, was his name, Mackenzie or whatever? And they're annoyed with him because he's not necessary. He doesn't fit the gameplay loop. He doesn't fit the premise. He's extra noise that is there because someone's indulging and they're self-inserting themselves, they're self-inserting their values into a game. They're trying to force something that's unnecessary down your throat when it doesn't fit what the aesthetic and the bare necessities of the game is required from a Metroid Prime 4, right? The premise of Metroid Prime 4, the premise of the gameplay loop, the premise of the narrative. And people don't like it. People are like, why was this in here? Why was this needed? And the people that do like it are defending it and ignoring the fact that, no, it doesn't need to be in there. Just because you like something, you can recognize it doesn't need to be in there, right? What's an example of this for me? Star Wars. You think of the prequels. You think of the pod racing scene. I love the pod racing scene more than anything else in that movie. But it doesn't necessarily have to be in the movie. And I understand that.
About food, eating food. Think of a fancy restaurant. If you've ever been to really high-end restaurants, sometimes the most delicious dinners you've ever had have a very small set of ingredients.
Yep.
Here's this sea bass, and here's a little bit.
How do you season a steak? Salt, pepper, butter. That's all you need for a steak. That's it.
And
it is just
what's
vegetables.
Amazing about
seasoned
it
vegetables.
is
That's all,
how it was prepared, and that the ingredients are the absolute freshest, best,
nicest
things you could possibly
quality
get.
over
You won't even know where to
quantity.
buy a
Quality
fish
over
or
quantity.
a cut of steak of this quality, and you might not be able to. Some of the really high cuts of beef are sold to restaurants first, and you're lucky to be able to find them. You'd have to go to a butcher to find them. You're not going to find them in your grocery store. What I'm saying here, there weren't a lot of extras, so it had to be done right.
Yep.
So those early
It's
games,
exactly what I said at the beginning. You have to painstakingly make this video game. You have to put your heart, soul, blood, sweat, and tears into making this video game. So you better do it right. Because why else would you go through so much suffering?
kind of like fancy restaurants. You kind of had to do it right, or you really couldn't do it.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm saying there
'Cause
were
you
a
would
lot,
fail.
I'm not saying there weren't a lot of bad games. By bad games, I mean not good for you. But when you play a lot of games back then, you encountered your
He's
bad
nice.
ones, the ones that ran
He's a lot
slow
nicer
or
than I am.
crashed or just didn't work right or didn't,
He's a
you
nice
didn't
dude.
like. But most games back then, the barrier to entry was so high. By the time you made a game, it at least was efficient and tight. Because
There you go.
And the question now is, can you do this today? You
Yes.
can. The problem is you don't have to.
Exactly.
So-
and that's what we need to change.
see it a lot.
We need to stay on top of these companies, and we need to that's what we need to look at. Did you have to do this? Was this something that was needed for the game? And if not, we chop it off. We criticize them. We don't give them our money.
Lot and in indie games more often because indie games, since it's
'Cause
usually
they
done
don't
by
have
one
the
person or a very
resources.
small team.
This is why
They don't
Expedition
have a lot of
33.
people to do a lot of things, so they focus on a very tight.
He's preaching.
core game loop.
Yup.
You can do this too.
Yup.
But the difficulty is when you start making a game, it's easy to go, I want to add this and I like this, and I just played a game that had this, so I want to pull it in. You
I've
need to be
been-
simple.
I've been
You
guilty
need to
of that
stay
as a
focused,
dungeon master.
And whatever you do has to be extremely well executed.
Yup.
And then you'll be like that fancy restaurant. You don't got a lot of ingredients in that meal, but that meal
I will tell you something. My D&D group, I when you watch Project Odyssey Burning Skies, I think that campaign is like a 4 out of 10. I think it's pretty bad. And I've been working on writing a better campaign. And my friendly D&D group wanted to do like a Scooby-Doo game. I don't know a lot about Scooby-Doo, but I learned about Scooby-Doo. I learned about the premise. I kept it tight. I kept the gameplay loop simple and tight. And I just stayed true to what was as faithful as could be for Scooby-Doo. I didn't try to force my own narrative. I didn't try to force my own values. I didn't try to add in all this extra stuff that I think would make it better. I didn't try to Jack Skellington it, right? I didn't try to steal Christmas and make Christmas better. I just tried to be as faithful as I could. And they loved it. So much so that they told me, I would have never guessed you didn't know anything about Scooby-Doo if you hadn't told me. And that was probably the highest and biggest compliment I could have ever gotten. And it's all because I took my writing techniques of keeping a simple premise and I added them to the gameplay loop. And that's exactly what this guy's talking about. And when you limit yourself, I've always said this to like my friends and family. Limitations force creativity. When you don't have any limits, when you're just able to do whatever you want, you more times than not are not going to be as successful as if you did have limits. When you give yourself a deadline, when you think about Minecraft, instead of just building something, whatever, if you say, I'm going to build a cathedral, you are now limiting your creative scope. And now you're trying to be as creative as possible with what you're given for that cathedral, right? Whereas like if you say, oh, I'm just going to build the coolest, biggest, awesomest building ever, there's no structure to that.
meal was delicious. And I will throw out, I know discoverability is an issue. I got a whole video about it. I'll link it below. But everybody faces that.
Yeah.
The big pubs face it.
Yeah, that's a different
Small
issue.
indies face it.
That's a different issue.
Big pubs deal with it by having a big marketing budget. The indies can try to overcome it by, if you're small, simple, easy to describe, and super good at what you do,
Yeah.
it's like a friend always says, cream rises to the top.
Hey.
Good luck. And also,
Oh,
you and Hasty 6779, good question.
very good question. That was really good. I like this guy. I think I'm subscribed to him. Am I not subscribed? What does this mean? It says join. I guess I am subscribed to him. I'll put the link below in the YouTube video for you guys to watch it for yourself. Really good video. I really enjoyed it. He said a lot of great things, and it's a lot of true, and it's a lot. He does highlight on a lot of issues that are going on in today's industry. A lot of issues why you see things like Ubisoft failing, Assassin's Creed failing, Ghost of Yotai not doing as good. And I'm not talking about sales numbers, right? I'm talking about like being beloved by consumers, being beloved by players. And it is because of that. It is because there's not a focus. There's not a premise, a core value that they stick to. If it's a tree, this may sound like a weird metaphor, but I want that tree to just look like a stick, right? The more you try to make that tree have branches and grow out and do the things and do all this other stuff, the more they're just you need to cut that off, right? This is like a bonsai tree. That's a better way of doing it. You look at the bonsai tree and you find the image that you're looking for, and you put that image in that bonsai tree, and then all this extra stuff is just going to look ugly, and it's actually going to obscure your vision of the bonsai tree. No one else is going to be able to see your design, right? If I wanted my bonsai tree to look like the Enterprise, and I'm working and I'm diligently doing that, that's cool. But the more I'm like, oh, but what if it had this Millennium Falcon feature? Or, oh, what if I put an X-Wing here? Or a Naboo TIE Fight, or a Starfighter here? Or what if I put Serenity over here, a Firefly vessel? And the second I start adding those different parts and pieces to my bonsai Enterprise, you can't see what it is. And so you have to make it there. That was an interesting analogy. But until next time, guys, play nice, YouTube.